Hi, I'm Jill with the West Regional Branch of the Mobile Public Library, and today's video is going to be about the differences between knit and crochet. Though the two skills both involve yarn and making fabric crafts, they're actually very different from each other, and you can learn just one or the other, or you can learn both. But this video hopefully will help you decide which one you want to take up or which one you want to try to learn first. And I also want to let you know there is no right or wrong answer to this. Some people prefer knit, some people prefer crochet, and depending on what you want to do and what your capabilities are, you may find that you like one better than the other, especially if you've got any kind of motor skill or other physical limitation, because you may find that you can adapt one better than you can the other. So let's get into it. The first thing I want to go over is the process of knitting and crochet. For knitting, you use 2 needles. You hold one in each hand. You'll notice I do not have the thread wound through my fingers. Some knitters choose to wind their thread around their fingers to better help with their tension, but it's not necessary, at least not in American or English style knitting, which is what I do. You do have to have enough fine motor control to hold on to the 2 needles and to the thread, but the majority of the motion is made with your entire hand. So this may be better for you if you have any sort of trouble using your fingers. And then the other thing about it is you'll notice that the stitches are clearly separated along the length of the needle, so you can very clearly see where each stitch is because there is some separation between the stitches. Now for crochet, you do it with one hook, and you hold that hook in one hand, and then you thread the yarn through the fingers of the other hand. In that same hand that you hold the yarn with, you also need to hold on to your project. So you do have to do a good bit of manipulation with both hands for this, because you have to hold your fingers in a specific position to keep the tension on the yarn. And then also with the hook, it's a much smaller movement than it is with knit, but there is both the pushing and then the twisting element, so it does take a little bit more fine motor control, but you do make much smaller motions than you do with knitting. So again, depending on how your hands work, you may find that one is much more comfortable than the other. And I will also point out that on the crochet, all of the stitches that I'm pushing the hook through are very close together. They are interlocked with each other, so they can be a little bit more difficult to see if you've got any low vision problems. A couple other things I want to mention about the process of knit versus crochet is because the movements are smaller, and because there are more loops in each single crochet, crochet tends to make up much faster than knitting. So if you do not have any mobility issues, that extra speed may make all of the difference between knit and crochet for you. Another thing to note in favor of crochet is you'll notice that there is a loop. There's only one loop on the hook for crochet, but there are multiple loops on the needle for knit. And all of those loops are considered live loops, meaning that if you pull out the hook or you pull out the needle, they can unravel. So if you need to backtrack or you have an accident and your needle or your hook falls out of your project, the crochet is much safer than the knitting is, because you will not have near as fast an unravel. Knit will unravel an entire row at a time. Crochet, it will be each stitch unravels individually. So for backtracking, crochet is a little bit safer than knit. So that's another thing to consider. Now we've gone over the 2 different processes to give you some idea of which one you may prefer. Let's talk about the outcome. What are you going to make with knit and crochet? And this is probably the bigger deciding factor for most people. You can do pretty much any type of project in either knit or crochet, but the details and exactly how it's going to come out is going to be a little bit different depending on which one you're using. The first big difference is the texture. This project is single crochets, and it gives you a cloth that looks like this, and this one is knit in stockinette stitch, and you can see how the cloth is patterned differently. And now there are multiple stitches for knit and multiple stitches for crochet, so that there are a bunch of different patterns you can get depending on which stitch you're using, but none of the crochet ones are going to look the same as the knit ones and vice versa. So if there's a particular sort of stitch pattern you want to see in your project, you will have to pick the appropriate skill to get that stitch pattern, because you cannot get like a stockinette version doing crochet and you can't get a single crochet version doing knit. Another big difference between knit and crochet is the fact that crochet gives you thicker material than knit does, at least on average. You can do really fine thin things like lace with crochet, and you can also do like a chunky knit cable. But if you're using the same size yarn and same size hooks and needles, you are going to get a thicker product in crochet than you will with knitting. Another thing to consider is stretchiness versus structure. Knit material tends to be more stretchy than a crochet is, which is great if you're trying to size a garment like a sweater or a hat. It gives you a lot more leeway. But on the other hand, the crochet has a lot more structure. So if you want something that's going to maintain its shape or stand up on its own, like you're making home goods like a basket or something like that, you probably want to do crochet. You can see this here, like this is crochet, and you notice it sticks straight out, whereas my elephant there, he's a little bit more floppy because he's knit, because he does not have the structure that crochet will give you. And then the fourth thing that's different is the fineness of detail. Knit, because the stitches are smaller, you can get a lot more detail in the same square inches of swatch than you can with crochet. So if you're doing something like an ugly Christmas sweater or an argyle, you may want to opt for knit so that you can get more detail more closely together than you can with crochet. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do a pattern with crochet. It's just going to be a little bit bigger and a little bit chunkier than an equivalent pattern in knit will be. And so those are your basic differences in your outcome, your final product with knit versus crochet, which means that some projects are more suited to one than the other. For instance, people usually crochet blankets rather than knit them, and people usually knit socks rather than crochet them. That doesn't mean that you can't crochet a sock or knit a blanket. It's just it's going to maybe take a little more time or be a little bit more difficult than doing it the other way around. So if you've got some specific sort of project in mind that you want to make hats, or you want to make sweaters, or baskets, or what have you, it's a good idea to look and see what patterns you can find before you pick knit or crochet, because if you see that this particular thing that you're making is overwhelmingly knit patterns or overwhelmingly crochet patterns, there's probably a good reason for that. It probably means that skill is a little bit more suited to doing that project than the other skill. So that is, something to take into consideration. But like I said, you can make pretty much anything with either. So if you find that, you can't crochet, you can only knit, you can probably find a pattern for whatever you want to make. You may just not have fewer choices. It may take you a little longer or something like that. Okay, so that's your two major considerations is which one can you do, and then also which one will produce the things you want to produce. Another thing some people consider is cost. Some people think crochet costs more because the material's thicker. It does use up yarn faster than knitting. Other people will say that knitting is more expensive because with crochet you can get, like, say, one hook set and make pretty much anything with that, with a range of sizes of hook, and you can make pretty much any project you want to make. Whereas knitting, you've got a bunch of different kinds of needles. You've got long needles, short needles, circular needles, DPNs, and if you want to make a wide range of projects, lots of times you will find yourself having to buy new needles. However, personally, I will say cost-wise, I think it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, because really to get started, all you need is one set of needles or one hook and some yarn. and that's pretty much equivalent price. And now once you get past the beginner stage, you know, you may need to buy some other things, but even for knit and crochet, you know, there's a wide variety of price points, wide variety of materials to choose from and tools to choose from, and you can spend as much or as little as you want to. And you know, for knitting, you may not need a set of everything. You may be fine with just your beginner straight needle set, and you may never buy any more. Whereas the crochet, you may find that even though you've got a set that you can theoretically do everything with, that you know, you really want to buy this other set that's made up of a different material, or it's got a different handle. So really, I think price is the concern there is negligible. Just pick up whichever one looks better to you, and you know, you'll end up spending probably about the same in the long run, whichever one you end up picking up. If you've got any tips or suggestions about, you know, how someone picks which one to learn or which one to start with, leave it in the comment box below this video. And as always, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.